Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Federico, and in this video I want to answer the one question that everyone approaching computer science for the first time is asking, and that is, which programming language should you choose? But truth being told, there is not a real correct answer to this, because it really depends on what is your final goal. If your goal is to find a job as a programmer, you should actually look at the job offering in your area and see which ones are the most in-demand programming languages. But even in that case, I wouldn't focus too much on that, because the first thing that you should do is to make some experience in programming in general, understanding all those things that are in common to every language, that are data structures, if, loops, all these kind of things. As an example, in my career as software engineer, I've changed companies 3 times, and each time I changed the frameworks and the languages that I've been using. So for instance, in my first job, I had a position more like a full stack software engineer, business analyst, and many other figures at the same time. But what is important is that the tech stack we were using was based on IBM WebSphere Commerce, using Java as a backend language, and then the standard HTML, CSS, JavaScript with jQuery to manipulate the DOM, and uses SQL for the databases. While in my second job, I was a backend engineer. In this case, we were using Python and C++ for the backends, and SQL and MongoDB for the databases. And even if I started this job without any prior experience of Python, it was not a problem, because I managed to learn it by doing, and since there are many similarities with other languages, it was not that difficult to learn it. Much more difficult was, for instance, to work with C++, because I had little knowledge about it, but luckily my company provided with some training, so I could understand the advanced features of it. In my third job, I actually changed completely. I was back a full stack engineer, but because we were using Ruby on Rails as a framework that covers both the front end and back end part. Then we had as well a front end working with Angular and TypeScript, so I had to learn that as well, but I didn't work so much on it. And this covers the full overview of the employee job that I had. For my personal projects, I've been using Unity with C# to develop video games, and for web application, I've been using Node.js for the backend together with Python and Flask, and React.js for the front end. While for databases, I usually choose MongoDB because it's much more easier to set up and start with. So you can see that as software engineer, it's not too much important to learn a specific language, but being able to adapt and willing to learn the new languages if you have the need of it. But if I need to give some suggestion of what language you should start with, I will divide this answer in the different applications that you can have. Like if you want to develop web application, mobile application, video games, and other things. For each one of them, there are probably some languages that are more fitting than others. So let's start with web development. The first thing you should probably be studying are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, because these ones are the most basic and most important languages to learn if you want to create a website and such things. While when you are ready and you are kind of confident using these technologies, you want to start doing more complex and dynamic application, you will probably need to find a backend technology to create APIs and interact with a database, and maybe a more complex front-end framework. So for these 2 things, I would suggest switching to Node.js for the backend, because if you already know JavaScript, it will be much easier for you than starting from scratch with another language. And for the front end, I would suggest again something between Vue.js, React, or AngularJS, because even in this case you will be kind of confident using the syntax of JavaScript, even though you will need to learn some specific syntax of the framework. Also, if you use Node.js, it will be easy to create API using Express.js and to interact with a database like MongoDB, because they have Mongoose that make it really easy to interact with it. But again, this is my personal choice, and there are for sure many other tech stack that you can use both for backend and front end, and if you think there are some others that are more performant for your specific case, or that they have certain libraries and modules that are more specific and fit in your kind of project, then go for it. Nothing is stopping you, really. What is really important is to be able to start and complete your projects and make experience. If you instead want to create mobile applications, you can go for the route of creating native apps, like using Swift to create iOS apps, and using Java and Kotlin to create specific Android applications. But as a beginner, I would suggest you to use a framework like Flutter that uses a Dart language but is able to build for both iOS and Android, so you don't need to learn the specific of each application. So you can start deploying this application in both the stores without having to write them twice. If you instead want to create video games, here it's not much of a question of the language you choose, but on the game engine you use. So if you go with Unity, for instance, you will learn C#, while if you want to go for a real game engine, you will have to use C++. So it really depends on what's your goal, what kind of engine you want to use, and once you decide that, you will learn the specific language of each engine. Consider also that creating video games will require you to understand much more than just a programming language. You will need to understand the physics behind the engines, maybe creating animations, design the levels. I mean, it's so much complex. So before embarking in super huge ambitious project, make sure you allocate some time to learn all of these things, and maybe starting with super simple games just to understand all these mechanics, and then maybe later switch to bigger games. And even better if you can team up with somebody, so you can at least split the workload and you don't need to be the master of everything. In the case you want to learn data science because maybe you want to switch career and do machine learning, this kind of things, probably start with Python because it's really beginner friendly and it has many libraries that are dedicated exactly to machine learning and data science. The other thing to know is that data science requires a lot of math, so if you're not really good with statistics and these kind of things, you may probably want to get back and study a bit of that as well. And also, if you want to do data science applied to big data, you will probably need to learn a language like SQL to understand better and optimize queries for databases. And this completes my list of languages that you should learn as a beginner for each of these fields. Now, there are other fields, applications and languages, like if you want to do Web3 and blockchain, probably you will want to learn something like Solidity that allows you to create smart contracts. But in that field there are so many new languages and technologies coming up, so you should check it out for yourself and find the one that is really fitting your project. So thank you guys for watching, and if you have specific questions and you have some doubts on what I told, or if you have suggestions of other languages that are more specific in each field, make sure to leave a comment in the section down below. And if you're interested in all of these topics and much more, make sure to subscribe because many more videos about software engineering, jobs and also business are coming up in this channel. So stay tuned and thank you guys, and see you in the next videos.